Let's say a few words about the norms that go along with each of those relational models. I'm going to talk about each model independently, and so I'm going to say much more about these in other videos. But let me say just this for now. In a communal sharing relationship, the basic norm is one for all and all for one. We view everything as shared jointly. Our responsibilities are joint responsibilities. The rewards we get are joint rewards. We all share in the benefits. And so people do not view themselves as differentiated. There is an emphasis on virtues of kindness, virtues of generosity within the group. People within the group view themselves as having responsibilities to the group and to each other that they don't have to people outside. So there is a quite explicit division between the people in the group and the people who are outside the group. The people within the group deserve a certain level of moral consideration that people outside the group do not. Now, sometimes this can be a positive thing, sometimes it can be a negative thing. It can be expressed as positive group solidarity, it can be expressed as a sort of negative attitude toward those outside the group. And so, as with any of these models, there are going to be positive and negative dimensions of the models. You have to watch out for trying to promote the positive manifestations and beware the negative manifestations. Often communal sharing relationships sustain themselves with rituals, with objects, with things that are viewed as symbols of what people have in common. In authority-ranking relationships, the norms are very different. And they differ with respect to whether it's a norm governing the behavior of a superior toward an inferior or an inferior toward a superior. So the people who are above in a relationship do have duties of protection, of care, of nurturing for those below them. Those below have obligations of respect, of deference to those above, obedience, a willingness to allow decisions to be made by those higher in the hierarchy, at least with respect to certain kinds of things. Again, there are positive and negative aspects to this relational model. This does allow for people with a greater degree of experience and knowledge to make decisions for the group. If we think those are likely to be better decisions, that seems like a wise group decision. On the other hand, this can turn into something that's quite authoritarian and even oppressive to those in a lower position. People below may feel a sense of obligation to obey those above, even when those people are making terrible decisions. In an equality matching relationship, there's a strong sense that balance has to be preserved, that we have to preserve equality. And so, whenever that gets out of balance, there is a norm saying it ought to be brought back into balance. People feel a strong sense of responsibility to maintain the balance. So there's a concern with that kind of balance. If things get out of balance, if somebody has too little, some other person has too much, there is a strong norm to bring things back to a level of equality. Finally, in a market pricing relationship, there is a different set of norms altogether, a set of norms based on proportionality. Your reward is to be proportional to something, perhaps to your share of ownership, perhaps to your effort, perhaps to your responsibility, to your contribution. Whatever it is, there is a concern for keeping rewards commensurate with responsibilities. People often here adopt a scale, a single metric, on which to measure responsibilities, on which to measure goods of various kinds. So there is a sort of unique scale of utility that people agree to use to determine the right ratios and proportions. Now, there are social interactions that fall outside this group that can be considered asocial interactions. They are the ones which are usually viewed as sociopathic or as unethical, where a person simply ignores the goals, the concepts, the intentions, the worth of another person, treating them merely as a means, not thinking about them as deserving any kind of moral consideration at all. That sort of relationship, if you can call it that, is one that seems fundamentally unethical. And it's one that can occur in extreme situations or among people who are doing bad things and exhibiting various vices. Of course, with respect to most of the people in the world, we don't have any real interactions at all. So there is also a null relationship, if you want to think of it that way, the absence of a relationship. And we don't tend to have norms governing that. If we have no interactions with someone at all, we don't really worry about the norms governing the relationship we don't even have. To summarize then, people are social animals. We are concerned with building up and maintaining social relationships. We're concerned with the health of those relationships. But how do we think about our interactions with other people? We think about them in terms of 4 basic models of human interaction. Communal sharing, where we're all undifferentiated as parts of the group, and all of our concerns are concerns that are joint concerns for the group itself. There are authority ranking relationships, where some people are above others, some people are below others. And we think of our relationships in terms of that kind of hierarchy. There are equality matching relationships among peers, among friends, among cousins or siblings within a family, where we view ourselves as individual now, but as deserving of equal shares, and also as having a responsibility to make equal contributions. And finally, there are market pricing relationships, the kinds of relationships we often have to strangers, but also have within organizations and as members of organizations to people outside in our business-type relationships, where it's a concern for proportions. Rewards are to be proportionate to contributions, and we're worried about ratios. We put things on a scale, often a monetary scale, but not necessarily, in order to make those comparisons and to keep the ratios and proportions something we can actually calculate and keep track of. Those 4 models define social relationships, and as we'll see, they largely constitute the ways in which we define our own concepts of ourselves.